In the last video, I said that I'd show you how to get more information on the pen tool. So let's start with that. If you go to my website that I have set up for students, which is profsteveg.wordpress.com, and then you go over to Software Help and you go to Illustrator. Now I know that's Illustrator and not Animate, but the pen tool works very similar in both programs. Also, feel free to draw inside of Illustrator if you're more familiar with it, and then you can just do a simple copy and a simple paste into Animate. And I'll show you more on that as this project progresses. But just from memory, you don't want the first option checked when you import, which says something about converting it to a bitmap, and I believe you want the other three checked. So feel free to experiment with that, or just follow along with the way I'm doing it. Also, there's yet another way. If you really hate the pen tool, you can just simply grab the classic brush tool. Make sure that you have the size of the brush tool pretty small, and then you could draw your outline with this tool. Now it won't be nearly as accurate as using the pen tool. It'll be a lot more sketch-like. Then once you have that, you can go to the paint bucket. Now you may have to experiment with this option here called gap size. And if you didn't draw perfectly and complete it, then if you had don't close gaps selected, it wouldn't fill them. But if you selected close small, medium, or large gaps, then it would fill everything. I'll select medium. Okay, so I have my paint bucket selected, and then I just simply click in there. And if I had a different color selected for the paint bucket, then it would work just like we saw before, where if you move this, oops, get out and make sure I got a good solid selection inside of there, you could have the two pieces separated and then turn that into your symbol. This is what we had at the end of the last video, and let's talk about some ways where we can make that look a little more interesting. If I click anywhere inside of my classic tween and I go to rotate, I can change the options here. So let's say I put clockwise in there. Then what's going to happen is it's going to rotate clockwise 360 degrees all the way through. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't. You can also go in here next to where it says clockwise, it's set to 1. I can set that to 0, which means that it won't quite go around one full time, and that may end up looking quite realistic. There's another thing to be aware of in here, and I'll show you more details on this with the next one we do, but there's this option in here where you can select orient to path. You may want to experiment with it now, but I'll show you more in just a bit. So let's move on to the second part where we had the complex path. Recall from the demo file here, the second one was quite a bizarre path. Okay, so let's go back to our working file. Let's first change the embarrassing misspelling of knife by double-clicking in here. And if you see my program bounce around a little bit, left to right, it's just because over in this area, I have the control buttons for making my animations, and sometimes I have to move away from them to do certain things. All right, so let's go ahead and lock everything that we've done so far, and let's go ahead and kind of duplicate this. So I'll click up here, click on the plus button, and this is going to be our knife 2. Then we know above that we need to make a guide. So we'll just call this K Guide 2 or something like that. We will tell it that it is a guide, and we'll drag this up underneath. So looks very similar to what we did before. And then we want to give ourselves a knife going all the way back to where this one first showed up. So we'll go here, do our F7, drag a knife out from the library. And on this one, what we'll do is I'll hit Q, which is the shortcut to bring out the free transform tool. I'm going to make it look very similar to this one. But one of the key things I'm going to do, and I suggest you do, is I will not change its orientation until after I explain a few things. Now for this one, let's say that we love this placement of the knife. It's very integral to our animation. And as we saw before, we just draw our guide and then we have to snap the knife on. So what if we don't want to have to move the knife from where it is right now? What we can do is use some accuracy tools here. We will select it to see where that center point is, and then we're going to turn on our rulers by going up to View, Rulers, and then we're going to, from the rulers, click and drag out a guide that brings us right to the center of that little circle. And then we'll do the same from this ruler. We're going to use that to help us draw our guide. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn the knife itself off from view. And I know that this is the starting point for my guide. And again, you could draw this guide with the brush tool, but the pen tool is your more accurate option. Now there's no sense in me drawing the guide until I really need it. So let's let this finish up, and then let's go over here. We'll make another instance of our knife, and then we'll do an F7, and this is where our guide will be. So click on this frame, we'll go to our pen tool, and we're going to start right here. And I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to go way up here and I'm going to click and drag. Go way down here, click and drag. You can, I've found, overlap these shapes you're making, but not too much. Eventually it will mess with the program. So just for simplicity's sake, let's not do that. Let's get wacky and go all the way off stage here. Come back. And this time, let's get sloppy on this side of it. Let's go too far. So we're going to be super precise over here and sloppy over here so I can show you two things. But there's our guide. Now, what we have to do is give ourselves that knife some room to go. I'll go about 1.5 seconds with it. We can always change that. We'll extend out our guide. We'll go back over here, turn the knife back on to visibility. It's probably already snapped here, but if not, we can check that later. We'll go to here. We'll grab our instance of the knife. And again, I'm not going to change its orientation, and I'm going to snap it at the end here, and let's see if it followed that. No, it didn't. Oh, well, of course I have to animate this. Now let's see. So it looks like it did. If it didn't lock on over here, then it would just be simply a matter of going back to this frame, taking the knife, moving it off, moving it back on to the beginning where we can feel it snap. Now we can go ahead and clear our guide. So we'll go up to View, we'll go to Guides, and we'll go to Clear Guides. That just gets rid of those. Now if I step through this animation, you can see that the knife, because I didn't change it on the first frame or the second frame, it stays very static. It stays straight up and down. If I click somewhere in my animation here, go back into Properties, and I go to orient to path. Now watch how this changes as we step through here. It does its best to kind of point in the direction of the path. So that's an interesting one to know of. And of course we can also put in rotate, say, of clockwise, and maybe have that at 1 and see how that works. Really doesn't matter what you do as long as you're learning a little bit as you go. Let me hit Command Return and see what this looks like so far. Okay, so one thing is our target got lost, and 2, that just moves way too fast for how complex it is. And I would say the first one moves a little bit too slow. So I'll go back here, click and drag all through here, hold Shift, and then do my F5 to tighten that one up. Go find my target here and extend that out to, go out to 4 seconds with this just to see what that looks like. And then I'll swipe across here and F5 that out. Then we'll take a look at it, see if it looks any better. Maybe. Let's at least extend this out here with another F5 so that we can see where it ends. And so we know that it is right here, which is clearly outside of our target. And that's why I said I wanted to be sloppy here, because I wanted you to see something, that it doesn't have to end at the end of the guide. So I can click on the object that's being guided, in this case the knife, and I can bring it back here. And as long as I feel it snap on there, and then let's even turn it this way, and then let's scrub the playhead to see if it did indeed snap. If it didn't, then we would just try it again. We could also go to the options up here under view and make sure that snapping to objects is turned on. And I think we'll call that good enough, but you can of course play with it. Oh, and I did notice another mistake in here. My first knife disappeared, so I need to extend that out simply by clicking on that layer, doing an F5. Now, there's something else that you can do to things to make them look even more real, and that is when something takes off in nature, it doesn't take off at an instant speed. And that's what's going to be the topic of the next thing that we do, is easing in and out of motion. But let me fix that pesky knife here. Oh, I see what I did. I extended the guide, but I didn't extend the knife. So now I think we're finally good.